Today I'm going to walk you through how to set up, configure, and use the power of IBM's DB2 Performance Experts Performance Warehouse. Before we begin, let me quickly explain how Performance Expert gathers performance metrics information. Performance Expert's historical information is gathered in three distinct ways: current, short-term, and long-term history. Performance Expert's Performance Warehouse is focused on the long-term history, which is used for training analysis. The long-term performance reports use the performance metrics gathered in the short-term data to generate training reports in the Performance Warehouse. This is the Performance Expert System Overview window. As you can see, I am logged on. I have selected the JK Enterprise instance, which the Performance Expert server is monitoring. Now let's drill down into the Performance Warehouse to run the Performance Expert process reports. To do this, we simply click on the Performance Warehouse icon in the toolbar at the top of the screen. These are the Performance Expert Process Group report templates. We can run the following reports from the performance data in the Performance Warehouse database. The Buffer Pool Activity Report includes all data elements that are related to the Buffer Pool snapshot data. You can create a short report, which includes information about buffer pools and table spaces, or a long report, which shows information about buffer pools, table spaces, and tables. The Database Activity Report includes data elements that are related to the database. It reflects many of the DB2 counters that are displayed in the Statistics Details window, but are collected and summarized over time so that you can see the overall long-term behavior of your system. This type of report is very valuable for trend analysis and for future capacity planning. It can also be useful for profiling a new or changed application in a test environment. For example, you can collect performance data over a series of test cycle runs, keep the data for each run, and compare it later. You can compare the test results with later production results as a way to validate your projections and improve them for the future. The OS Activity Report includes information about the utilization of the CPU and information about the file system and statistics information about the operating system on which the monitored DB2 instance runs. The Sql Activity Report includes all data elements from the Statement Event Monitor. It contains detailed information about the SQL statements that are performed by the applications that run on the specified database. The SQL-PL Profile Report includes data elements from the Statement Event Monitor. It contains profile data for each SQL-PL procedure that was performed by the applications that run on the specified database. This report helps you find bottlenecks in SQL-PL procedures. Now let me show you how we create a process to run the Database Activity Report and the SQL Activity Trace Report for the GoSales database. The first thing we need to do is create a process group. A process needs a process group as a container. To create a process group, we right-click on the process groups folder and select Create. I want to create a process group to help organize my GoSales database process reports. Since all these reports are going to be running against the GoSales database, I'm going to call the process group GoSales. And for the description, I'll type GoSales Process Group. I recommend to use a name that helps you organize your reports as well. Next, we're going to copy the Database Activity Trace Report template. In the Process Properties window, we can select the status to in definition or active. In definition allows you to make changes to the process, as well as run the process. When it is in active mode, the report can be ran. A process can only be modified when it's set to in definition status. If it is set to in definition, and you go to access the process report, the status will change to active, and a message will appear informing you of the switch. We can set the scope to either private or public. When you copy a process template, the scope changes from public to private, so that this process can only be seen by the current user because we are still working on it and setting it up. To make it available for all users, we can simply set the scope to public. To view the report step properties, we right-click on the Steps folder, right-click on the report, and select Properties. Now that we're in the report step properties, let's take a look at the Options tab. If we want the report to run on a certain date, click the Fixed Date Radio button, click the calendar icon, and select the date we wish to choose. If we want to schedule this report to run on an interval, for example every Friday night, to pull data from previous Wednesday's database activity, we select the date relative to Process Execution Radio button and enter the date we want to gather information for. If we want to gather information for every Wednesday, and we schedule to run the report on Friday, Friday would be considered 0, Thursday would be -1, and Wednesday would be -2. So we'll enter -2. Next, we want to pull the data from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock p.m. We'll select the Go Sales database we want it to run against. Next, we can either choose to run a trace or summary report. For this example, we'll run a trace report. We'll also run this against both partitions. Before we run the database activity trace report, we have the options to execute once, immediately, execute once on a certain date, or execute repeatedly according to a schedule. We'll choose the last option since we want to run the report weekly. On the Schedule tab, we can specify the day of the week and the time we want to run the report. We can check the status of the report by clicking on the Process Executions folder, as you can see here. We can view the process execution details by selecting the Database Activity Trace report. When the process is finished, the Performance Warehouse will automatically store the report internally. Let's go ahead and take a look at the report. As you can see here, we can view the Database Activity Trace report in HTML format. By analyzing this report, we're able to see the overall long-term behavior of our system. This report is very valuable for trend analysis and for future capacity planning. Now that we have successfully ran the Database Activity Trace report for the Go Sales database, let me show you how to run the Sql Activity Trace report. We'll begin by right-clicking on the Sql Activity Trace report template and selecting Copy. Next, we'll simply add the copied process template to the Go Sales process group we created. We can now view the process steps for the Sql Activity Trace report at the right. We'll start with the CRD step. The CRD, or Collect Report Data step, collects performance data using an event monitor. In the CRD step properties, under the Options tab, we select the Go Sales database from the drop-down list. Here we can also edit the elapsed time and the event monitor file size. Next, we'll view the Load step properties. The Load step parses the contents of an event monitor file and loads the file contents into a Performance Warehouse data table. In the Options tab, we'll select the Retrieve the text of the static SQL statements checkbox. By default, Performance Expert gathers dynamic SQL information. We check this box to gather both dynamic and static. For the SQL Activity Trace report, the report step properties are already configured by default. We can now run the report by clicking on the SQL Activity Report and selecting Execute. This time we'll choose the Execute Once, Immediately radio button. Under the Process Executions folder, we can see that the SQL Activity Trace report is running. Once the process is finished running, we can go ahead and view the report just as we did before. The SQL Activity Report contains detailed information about the SQL statements that are performed by the applications that run on the Go Sales database. We have now successfully ran two process reports, the Database Activity Trace Report and the SQL Activity Trace Report, using IBM DB2 Performance Expert's Performance Warehouse.